Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pretzel Talks at Learning Pretzel. I am so delighted to share with you this amazing woman, Annabel. Now, Annabel is such an incredible and a powerful woman in this world. Her accomplishments and her impact in this world is so long that I don't want to take all the time to introduce it and list all of her achievements, but she's a certified holistic life coach. And what we're meeting today for is to discuss how is it that she became the best selling author of the Step Jump book and share with us some insights about trauma, turning it into triumph, and all that is involved with that. But I'm not going to tell you anymore because there's plenty of surprise. I just want to welcome you, Annabel, because I'm so delighted to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you so much for having me. It's so good to be with you all today.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful to have the opportunity to talk to you about it. Now, I just want to acknowledge for all of you guys that you're watching us from. Welcome. This is always a form of a dialogue, so please make sure you say hello. Tell us where you're watching from. If you have any questions, we always try to weave them into our little chat, so we'll try to answer any questions. But Annabel, wow. Step Jump. Now, I have to say that not only is it a bestseller, but what a powerful book that is.
Thank you.
How did that came about? Like, how did Annabel came about? Like, how did Annabel came to place where she's right now?
Oh my goodness, that's a great question, Ted. Many years of evolving my healing. As a coach and keynote speaker, I love sharing stories of how I have overcome my body issues or culturally family obligations and being a first generation immigrant in the United States and the pressure of all of that, being the perfect daughter, right? And I would love sharing even how I had the audacity to even run for public office, but I have never shared with anyone that I'm a September 11th survivor. Step, jump, step, jump. That morning, it was a bright Tuesday morning, and I woke up late. I woke up to the cawing of crows, and I looked out my window, and my whole tree was filled with the murder of crows. And I remember having that as my animal spirit, but I couldn't remember what the lesson was. I was like, okay, I got to hurry up and go to work. And so I did. I jumped on the train, the number 1 train, and got to my office just to see my boss's sweater on the chair. And then I was like, oh no. So I got everything ready for the stock market. I worked at a boutique hedge fund. And so I was printing everything and all the computers were on, getting settled, reading the paper. And then all of a sudden I felt something fall on my building. And I got up and I ran to the window and I looked out and it was clear, sunny. There was all the other buildings were upright. There was no announcement. No fire alarm, nothing. And then the rumbling began. And then I ran to the doorway and I was like, oh, Dios mío, ¿qué hago? Dear God, what do I do? And the whole office had turned a muted gray. And I share this in my book, and I'm sharing this with everyone today because sometimes there's these moments in our life where something out of our control happens and we ask a question and we get an answer, but do we follow through on the answer? I was so afraid. I literally had to tell myself, Annabel, you have to try to get out of this building, even if you die trying. And so with all my I had to face death to take that first step on the stairway. in the hallway. And I went, and as I was running, the floors were shifting. I felt like a rag doll in a fun house. And I finally got to the stairway, and I couldn't tell if the doorknob was hot or cold. And I knew that you're not supposed to open a door if the doorknob is hot, because that means that there's a fire on the other side. But I couldn't even tell if it was hot or cold, Ted. I mean, I was so out of sorts. And I just stopped, and I just was breathing in and breathing out. And literally, the practice of meditation saved my life, just so I could listen to my synapses and tell, okay, it's cold. I flung open the door, and then there's no smoke, but there is this like stench, and it just is choking. And then I was like, okay, there's something going on. Something is burning. I don't know what it is. Like I said, there was no announcements, no fire alarms. I was still completely by myself. And so I just was like, I got to get out of here. And I just focused on my feet and my momentum, and putting my hand on the handrail. And I stepped with my left, and I stepped with my right, and I jumped on this landing, and I just step, jumped, and step, jump. And so much of my book goes into more of what happened that day and my healing evolution. But really, how I got here today was those three things embodying me understanding how I am triggered and what my traumas are. And my second step is practicing self-reflection and self-awareness. And then really it's to break a pattern, to grow, to be the person I am today. I had to take new action. And so that's really what Step, Jump is all about.
This is such a powerful story. I just want to acknowledge our viewers. Hello, Miriam. Hello, Joy. So lovely that you can be here with us. I have a question, guys, for you that are watching us. Why don't you pop in the comments, where were you at 9/11? What were you doing? What was your day like? Because Annabel just drew a picture for us of how it looked for her. I know, reading through your book, that you describe how full of life you were, right? How the day before you went to that party and you felt full of life, and you're drawing us this picture of this beautiful, energetic, vivid, young, ambitious woman, full of life, grasping everything. And the powerful line that really struck with me, I think that that's even in an introduction to the book, to be honest with you, is where you said that you weren't the same, that you were a different person that went to work and a very different person that left the building. Yes. And it just draws this transformative experience, of course, traumatic. And in the way you write about the book, it's so vivid. You bring us there. You really put that on the inside. And I appreciate that it's a relation of a survivor. You really put a memoir. There's no speculations. There's no theories there. You're really translating what actual impact it had on a person that has been there in the building. I remember being in like 9/11. It was 2001, because we're coming. Isn't it that it's 20th anniversary coming this year?
It's going to be 20 years now. Yeah.
And I remember vividly that day. I remember thinking that I remember very, very well that it was after school, and I was going to my friends. We were going to study, and we were going to put like MTV on and like blast some music, and then we've turned on TV, and the channels stood there, and we were watching all of that, and we were absolutely astonished. We were just frozen. And I don't know for how long we were standing there, because nobody was breathing. Nobody was saying anything. And I cannot even think how it must have been on the 9/11 for anyone who was in that office. You draw such a powerful story of everything that happened from the moment you noticed it, with those beautiful realizations that even in the time of such a shock, you still remembered, I think it's from the school, right? That you just touched the knob with one finger that you were just talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And I
wanted to,
wanted to,
sorry.
yes, no, sorry. I just wanted to ask you because I see that Miriam was saying she was at the office and she heard it on the news and then she was watching it on the TV. And Joyce says that she was on the treadmill watching the Today Show, right? And watched the horror, feeling sick in the stomach and remembering it like it was yesterday. It's such a powerful and historical, traumatic event. But I wanted to ask you how this event has transformed your life, has
Mm,
transformed Annabel. Because obviously, the consequence, which is the trauma, which is what happens within us when we're exposed to those events, right?
mm,
What a strength it takes, courage, I'm sure help, but where did you even start? I can't even begin to imagine the process of turning trauma into being able to live again.
That's a powerful question, Ted. And so, um, I will share that when I had gotten out of the tower, Anthony actually shared a cab with me. I walked up to Canal and Broadway, and he was nice enough to share the cab. And much of the book is me in the cab trying to go uptown, trying to get back to the Bronx. And one of the things that happened was we were on Canal, Church and Canal, and we were at a stoplight, and we were trying to go. So I was like, "Come on!" I was telling the cab driver, "We got to go," because the light just turned green. And he goes, "Wait, the people!" And all these people started screaming and running into the intersection. They almost got ran over, and there was a white plume behind them. And Anthony and I, we didn't know what that was or anything. And we finally get to Avenue of the Americas. We go north and we turn around and we see that there's only one tower left. And we just fell apart because we were like, the people, did everyone get out? And so the last time I actually laid my eyes on the towers was just my tower burning. And that feeling of a place that I worked so much in, and a place that I had so much of my reputation and prestige and just power, like, oh, I'm making it, it's like,
Mm.
it was a huge opportunity
Feeling
to
like an
learn
identity, isn't it?
everything. And then my own, but then us culturally, collectively, it being gone. And I remember I studied political science, and
Mm.
my memory came to those moments in history class where I would read about wars and be emotionally distraught. And that's what it brought me back to. It brought me back to remembering, I'm Ecuadorian, I'm Native, I'm African and European. And to know my ancestors' history, they did so much harm to each other, right? And so it brought me back to that moment, to that. Now I know the term, it's called intergenerational trauma. But when I only had my body and the skin I'm in, and I don't have a building because my building just collapsed, went back to Mother Earth. It was rubble. And then now all of those titles and prestige and all those things that I had thought of myself were gone. And that was the beginning of me healing, because it really brought me back to my soul, and it allowed me to realize that anything I pursue it from myself is an idea of myself. But truly, that was the beginning part of me realizing I have a soul that needs to be expressed. I have a soul that is fully alive. How am I grounding myself in that? And that's really what allowed me to continue on and always ask that question and really be the coach I am today, is to help others ground themselves and get in touch with that, with their soul, with their inner purpose, and to do that shadow work, that work that is so hard because it's painful, but it's holding us back in some way in our life. And so I hope that helps answer the question. I know I needed to
Yes,
share. Things had to fall away. There's a book by Chinua Achebe that's called Things Fall Apart. And things in some ways have to fall apart for you to find yourself again.
Absolutely. And Miriam just says that you're so beautiful. You're a beautiful soul, Annabelle. And Joy just commented that it raises the question, who am I? Which I want to piggyback on that question, because it is incredible how in the times of loss and trauma, especially, we want to hold on to something as a comfort, right? Something that reminds us of who we are and speaks volume to what you're talking about. Of course, when we talk about overcoming trauma, it's such a complex journey that it will be impossible probably to cover that in one Pretzel Talks. But what really surfaced for me in a lot of the things that I have read is that you had incredibly strong courage, and although it does comes through in the book that at the time of your escape you felt so lost, you were grasping to know that, I think it's a chapter 3 when you're talking about standing on their staircase and you're like looking at each other and everybody's trying to get some comfort, but you're probably all equally as terrified. And it just puts you really into the position that you ask yourself this question: how much comfort do you actually experience on a daily basis? And it puts in the context that if you lose that, if you ask this question, what if, what when, it really shifts the whole perspective. And the one thing that I remember reading a very powerful article, now I am not even going to attempt pronouncing the name because I think that the man was somewhere from Scandinavia. I don't want to do it this justice, but I remember that he was writing about trauma. And one of the things that really stood from me is how he said that you really have to drop yourself completely but bring yourself up again, which in the beginning didn't really make sense to me. But he was saying that when you're dealing with trauma, that it comes to the point where you just have to let the guard down and
Yeah,
ask
it is.
yourself who you are and rebuild. And the biggest, and what really stood out for me in his article was how he negated a little bit the term bounce back, because such a popular term, right? We bounce back from setbacks, from this,
Yeah.
from that. There's no such a thing as bounce back. It's
No, there
rebuild.
isn't. There
You
isn't.
rebuild, but you don't bounce.
Yeah, and I will say something that came to me as you were speaking is, for me and for many who experience trauma, it's whether it's a divorce, whether it's having the diagnosis of cancer, and having someone that you love pass away. There is a part of your ego that dies. And that death is almost necessary as you have your own rebirth. So how that rebirth looks like, now that's in your hands. That is where the work comes in. There is no bounce back. There is no such thing as being healed. I will never be healed from September 11th. And that's what keeps me human. I think that we as humanity need to question ourselves when we think, okay, I have this checklist and I'm going to get to that point and then I'm going to be done. There's no being done. And it's just, we just keep evolving. And so for us to be able to embrace that, like, yes, there was a lot of my own egos and that's why I shared, I was bare. I didn't have my work building. I couldn't go back there. I couldn't say that I worked on Wall Street. I couldn't look like I had, arrived, like I was modeling, I was dancing, I was working on Wall Street. I mean, literally I was doing everything I was supposed to do and wanted to do, and still something happened and it just took it all away from me. And so
Mm.
that's going to happen to us. And the notion of comfort also tends to be conflated with security. We
Mm.
have this notion of security, and I think the security gives us comfort, right? But when
Yeah.
security is taken away from us, we're uncomfortable. And then how are we showing up? It,
Yes.
it will demand, in this pandemic, it did demand us not knowing what was going to happen if we went outside, if we caught COVID, if,
Absolutely.
not knowing what was going to happen with us in our jobs, not knowing what else was, our children not being in school. I mean, it was, for me as a September 11th survivor, I was so prepared for the pandemic because I had already gone through that after September 11th. So I was
Mm.
able to be more available for my daughters. But I would remind them when they were having a really hard time that it's like, honey, people, when they experience war, they don't go to school. I was like, so we're lucky that we get to actually go on a computer and still learn. Like I kept trying to remind them, like, it's terrible when there's a real, like everything stops.
Mm.
And having those conversations actually helped them and even helped other
Mm.
people um, kind of step back and see what we do have versus what we don't have, right? And that day of war did that to
Absolutely.
me. That's the lens. Um, it's a powerful one. It
Well,
stops
that's
the
for
crowd,
sure. That's
but
for sure.
it gives
Mm.
me perspective.
Of course. Well, I was just going to say, like it definitely changes the perspective. It shifts the whole paradigm, really, because when you think about it, to really embrace such a traumatic event, to rebuild yourself, to redefine who you are, to feel secure, safe within yourself again. And perhaps for some people, probably within trauma, it's to do it for the first time, right? Because we tend not to ask ourselves those questions. So I think that it's just incredibly powerful when we look at it from this perspective. And I am just so glad that you're here today, that I have the opportunity to speak to you today. And for anybody who's watching this, I had the pleasure of reading parts of your book, and I'm looking forward to finishing it. And it's a one powerful book because you draw a vivid pictures and you really show us a perspective, which knowing what who you are today, first of all, that you are here today, knowing what you do as a holistic coach, how you help people turn traumas into triumph, rediscover themselves, go through this process, which is definitely difficult. But I am sure that in the work, although being asked probably would you go through it again, I don't know whether you would decide for that. But this experience, that part of you, because those traumatic events become part of us, really made you equal with people who probably seek counsel and help with it. I love the saying by Pema Children. Pema Children, I think she says that in one of her books, that true healing doesn't happen between the superiority imbalance. It only happens between two equals, because they can withstand the darkness of each other's pain. And I
Mm.
think it's so powerful when you look at it, that there is someone who can understand what you've been through. And i'm
Mhm.
just i'm just so grateful for you being here and being having the opportunity of people learn more about you, hear more about you.
Thank
I've popped some
you.
links in the chat if anybody wants to get in touch with Annabelle. There's a link to the book which I highly recommend. um and I'm just really curious with your work. Where is your intention with doing what's your intention with the book, with your coaching, with all of the work you do with the cultural awareness, with the well-being, because you work a lot with the well-being of the cultures, of societies, of individuals as well. What drives you? What's the intention that Annabel wants to make sure that she brings every day to all of that you do?
Wow, intention. Definitely to be available. One of the things that I realized I had 3 moments that I talk about in the book. One where I got to the church at the end of the day. I finally got uptown. I was in Washington Heights, and I was standing there, like, thanking God that I had made it. And all of a sudden, I feel the current of my blood in my wrist. I didn't know that was possible. I was like, what? And then I had gone to Seattle and then experienced a 10-day meditation, and then felt my energy in my midsection. I mean, it wasn't reading it in a science book. I mean, everyone, we know we're made of energy and we read about it, but when you experience it, that's something completely different. And then my dear friend Carolyn invited me to a sweat lodge where I was able to truly give all that dense energy and all that to Mother Earth. And she transmuted it all. I mean, being in a sweat lodge, it's like you're in the womb of Mother Earth. But I had never experienced that. And so what I learned from those 3 experiences is, whether it's through trauma or through peace, the notion of our universal intelligence, our consciousness, God, is not an object or just a personification. It's within us, and it's within every living thing, and with Mother Earth. So being available to that is my work and is my intention. What I hope to do with, clients and helping them is really for them to become more available to that, so that they can live out their purpose. But collectively, when I think, my vision would be for this book to really impact the world, where we are finally willing to look at ourselves personally and say, I want to be responsible for the energy I bring into this world and this earth. And it's not just once a week when I go to church, and it's not just once, when I'm the leader of a team. It's all the time. It's with my children, it's with myself, because when I'm right with myself, I contribute to the collective wellness of everyone. And so what my hope is, which I know everyone will see themselves in a story in my book, because September 11th is the acute trauma, but I share church trauma. I share being, having hands where they should have never been, and dealing with that kind of trauma. So it's compounded and it's throughout the book. But if I didn't take it upon myself to seek and continuously try to heal and try to understand, and why is this happening, going beyond why this is happening to me, right? But to actually say, okay, what can I learn from this? And if nothing changes right now, who do I have to be if nothing changes right now? Because so many times we think the condition and the circumstance has to change for us to change. Yeah. But it doesn't work that way. I have to change first. I have to have it within first. And then the whole realm around us is going to change. And so that is my personal intention, to be available, and that others make time to become available to what they don't know. And it's usually in your cultural blind spot. Our culture will sometimes not have the answers, and you have to go outside of that to get them.
I love when you say that. Joy just popped a comment in there that it's so beautiful, the personal awareness and ownership for the energy we bring and how we show up in the world. She says she absolutely loves that. I agree, Joy, and it's a wonderful comment. Thank you so much for popping it in there. Now, I just can't help myself but to see that it's a such a multi-dimensional piece of work you do, because you don't only go through spiritual, mental, psychological evolution slash transformation with your work. You also bring a sense of awareness, but not only social but also personal. It's so hard to pin down to a singular things that I adore and admire about your work, because it's so incredibly important. We do have a tendencies. I think many of us have a tendency to look on the outside, right? We keep looking for the outside. When where something isn't working, we get it outside, whether it's a purchase, whether it's a shopping, and we engage with external environment, right? But I wonder how many of you guys there, if you're watching, how many of you have had that moment in your life when you realized that something wasn't working, you couldn't put a finger on it, so you went on the search outside? How many of you have felt it, that it wasn't me, I was looking on the outside, and then there was a moment where you cut yourself, that it's not going to be on the outside? And I think this is where the challenge is, and your work is so tremendously important. And I can't stress it enough, because people will only start to embrace and contribute to their communities, societies, to the global community of human beings, if they start with the work on the inside of themselves, right? Because how you be is what you do. Like, how you are on the inside is how are you going to do out there. If you don't heal, you're going to project that. If you don't look after yourself, you're going to be repeating the same things. And I think that isn't it a definition of insanity, that insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result?
Yes.
So we just go around like excited cucumbers full of water. But the truth is that work is incredibly important. And especially what I like that you said, Annabelle, is this part where you highlighted this personal responsibility and this awareness. Because whether you're a leader, whether you're a partner, whether you're a single person that just lives and functions within the world, whether you're a teacher, you're a janitor, a CEO, it doesn't really matter. It all starts inside of you, right? And then if something doesn't work in there, it will manifest itself on the outside. But I remember a week ago we had a beautiful conversation with Joy, and she used this analogy, right? That we people have tendency to cut off the rotten fruit of the tree, right? But the problem is very often not with the rotten fruit. It's down in the roots. So unless you go and uproot the problems, you're not going to change anything. The root is going the rotten fruit is going to come back. And just
That's
looking
powerful. That's really powerful. And it's
is
difficult, right? And it's holding on to that mindset that allows it to get perpetuated.
absolutely.
So
Well, mindset I think is the biggest blocker, right? Everything starts with mindset. In my work, I very often encountered that although the external problems, external causes for consultations and coaching and training can be various, then when we really go diving deep into it, the only way to really do anything about it is to work on the mindset. And I
it's part of it.
absolutely
It's not completely. I mean, there's a lot that happens in
of
our
course.
bodies. So I like to do that work as well.
Mm.
There was something that I was going to say something about that, but it slipped my mind.
But it is incredible. So Annabel, so what can we expect from you? You have a book out. If people want to get in touch with you, who is the perfect person that we can send your way? If they're watching it, invite them over to help them, to reach out to people who come across this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say, people that have a vision bigger than themselves, right? When they're trying to do something for the collective, but they want a coach that's going to allow them to give them that safe space for them to be vulnerable. And what I found is definitely leaders and coaches, because it's really difficult when you're in that position, when you have the care of others is in your hands, or you're leading a team, for you to actually have a place where you can take off your cape, where you can ask deep questions and not go beyond the five senses. The five senses just keep us here in the material, but many times you will need that time as a leader and a coach to speak and study and practice in things that are in the unseen, that are beyond. And so those are the type of people that I work best with. If they're only in the five senses, I mean, then it's more anecdotal and it could be a quick session, but in terms of long term, like a 6-month program, then definitely it's usually with people that have visions bigger than themselves, have a high consciousness, are willing to put in the time to go beyond the five senses. And that's actually what they're looking for. They're looking to learn what they don't know. So it takes that type of mind. And that's really, my clients and who I love to work with. But I still do speaking engagements and workshops for corporations and nonprofits. I do that work as well. But one-on-ones, that's usually the type of person that that I serve.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. So if you're listening to it, if you want to make the shift between the extra personal and parapersonal space, if you want to get out of the five senses, look deeper and really embody and embrace your true self, you know where to find Annabel.
Yeah.
Everything is in the comments, right? Annabel, thank you so much for being here. I have to say that there's still so many things I would love to ask you, but I'm just very mindful of the time. And it's the best way probably is that to schedule it again. But if anybody has any questions, I encourage you to pop them in the chat, pop them in the comments, send us a message. You can find Annabel or myself. We'll try to respond to the messages as they surface. And once again, Annabel, thank you so much for being here and for doing the extraordinary work that you do. I don't think that there's a time where your book was more needed, where your work was more needed, and where your intentions were more spot on to what people should be really focusing on. Thank you so much.
Ted. Thank you for having me. And yes, I look forward to the questions and I will comment as well.
Thank you very much, Annabel. Thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned in. There's some more events coming on the Learning Pretzel, so make sure you check them out as well. You can follow Annabel and myself on pretty much most of the social platforms. The names are in the comments. Thank you once again and have a lovely evening, everyone.